Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Exploring Health, Macro to Micro with Parker Condit. I'm your host today, and we're kind of kicking off season 2 with a bit of a different episode, obviously recording live in person. And I'm here today with Dr. Hassan Makki. He's the founder, and he's also a cardiologist. He's the founder of the Heart and Wellness Center here in Paradise Valley, serving sort of the larger Phoenix, Scottsdale area. So we're talking today with him because he has a very interesting and innovative vision for what his practice is going to be in the future. And he's already kind of started that. So we're going to discuss a little bit about your background and why you have this particular vision for your practice in the future. So I'd love to start with sort of your background from how you got into cardiology and then where your desire and your passion for integrating other parts outside of medicine into your practice came from.
So nice to meet you, Parker. Thanks for coming in. And hello, everyone. Yes, so my career is like similar to a lot of other cardiologists. We start off, with undergrad and the sciences, and I became interested in cardiology while I was in medical school. I found the heart very fascinating, and interestingly, in medical school, my joy and my passion for working out was also reignited at that time, because when you're in that situation where like you're basically just studying and you have time for maybe one hobby.
Sure.
So luckily, one of my classmates, Paul Metcalf, he was like a bigger guy, and his thing was he was a trainer. So I had Paul at my disposal for like 2 years. We'd work out together. I had been into like weightlifting and just athletics in general my entire life. That's always been like my default setting is sports and exercise. I think that's been like a family thing, that we always had sports and exercise as like a fundamental in our household. Everybody's playing a sport, and everybody, we study and everything. So yeah, in medical school I started exercising like with more knowledge from a trainer, and I just noticed like, wow, it makes a difference when you train with someone that knows what they're doing. So that was now about 24 years ago. And I've kept it up, the working out. And so fast forward, like I said, my career is similar to other cardiologists. You go to residency, then fellowship, and then you start seeing patients. And after doing something for a while, especially like the way medicine is practiced now, I feel like a lot of it is converter belt. Like everyone is put on this moving thing where we throw some tests at you, whatever sticks, we treat you. But I've been doing this long enough now where like it's not adding up anymore. It's basically let's talk about hyperlipidemia for a second. Like I'm trained from our medical school and residency and fellowship training is like to look for certain numbers, and then once we see these numbers, we're alerted to prescribe these certain drugs. And that fits really nicely for us because it's clean.
Yep.
Right? And then similarly, like when I started doing interventions, which is where we go in, we cath people, we find blockages, put a stent in there. Very gratifying for me, but am I doing the best thing for the patient? I think now the evidence has shown that maybe we're not doing the best for the patients. There was a new article that came out this summer that showed about 25% of stents were inappropriate. Okay. And that is using just the basic appropriateness criteria. This is not to say like these people were put on exercise regimens, they were not put on clean diets. This is just with our statins and blood pressure. Like this is
your set of tools.
Our set of tools.
Yep.
Yeah. So doing that for a while, it kind of burns you out. It's like I write about this on my website as the rationale for this place, for the Heart and Wellness Center. It's like someone is having an emergency, they're having a heart attack, we go in, we put a stent, and then we save their life. And then they're right back to where they were right before they had the emergency. And there's like years of problems and preventative things that could have happened. So for even more long-winded explanation, I delved into the wellness space very hard. Some of it was based on my own knowledge. I've always kept up with the current nutrition and stuff that were not covered in our curriculum, and so I have to become an expert on all these things. I have to know at least what the YouTubers know, and then have some
YouTubers.
Yeah, and then add some actual evidence to what I'm preaching. And so certain patterns, came up while doing all this research and just doing like a deep dive into preventative medicine. Okay, the number one thing, and this can be debated, whether what is the number one thing that a preventative cardiologist would advocate. I bet you most of them would say it's nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, nutrition, and most of the well-known doctors are well-known because of their nutrition recommendations. But to me, physical activity is number one, because that is, when you look at a human being walking in front of you on the street, it's just a bunch of muscles and bones. Mm-hmm. We don't see the organs. It's like it's so we're meant to be doing stuff with these muscles and bones. And so I think we talked about this before, that you could, not that I want people to do this, but we could beat a bad diet with exercise or hold it off. But the vice versa is not true. Like, you can't eat whatever you want and then or eat perfectly and expect perfect health without doing exercise and things along those lines. So that's why I had a gym installed in my place. That's why it's like the number one thing on my pyramid is exercise. And I think that's how we most clearly overlap.
Mm-hmm. So I agree. And this was like one of the fun questions I would ask people just working in the fitness industry. And just to introduce myself to anyone who's watching from Dr. Mackie's audience, my name is Parker Condit. Anyone who's coming from my side, you're familiar with me. I'm the founder of In Touch Health and Performance. I'm a health coach and personal trainer, and I specialize in aging populations and kind of on the preventative side. When people care about chronic disease states that are very common in this country, that's where I really focus on people, of not just getting them in better shape and better overall health, but kind of trying to attack some of these chronic diseases that are so prevalent here in the US. So being in the space for a while, I would often have like this fun, dumb debate of like, if you could only pick one, nutrition or exercise, which one would you pick? Obviously, being a trainer, I was always on the side of exercise, but I do take it a little bit more seriously now. And I'm not sure why you land on that side, but for me, muscle mass is so important. And it's not for the fact that like you need to look like a bodybuilder. You just need to have enough muscle mass in your body to readily store and like accept glucose that is kind of like pouring through your bloodstream. Muscle mass, beyond the aesthetic, I think bodybuilders have kind of done a bit of damage in that people are like, I don't want to look like that. I don't want to be in the gym 6 days a week. And that's certainly not necessary. It's just increasing the quality of muscle tissue that you have and putting a little more muscle mass on. It's something that's very hard to do with nutrition alone. Obviously, this is kind of like a moot point because we don't have to choose just exercise or nutrition. I think we're just both highlighting the importance of exercise. And for me, it's for muscle mass, it's for cardiovascular health, where it's like you can't improve your cardiovascular capacity without exercise. Like, nutrition's not going to do it. It'll help minimize damage being done from your nutrition, but exercise just has these additional inputs that are incredibly beneficial. But yeah, I would like to hear, like, what is it about exercise that you land on that side of the argument?
So yeah, this is a self-created debate, right? Exercise versus nutrition. Why are we even comparing the two, right? They should be done. They're natural allies. They should be done together. And if you notice, like, when you work out, you don't crave the bad food. Okay, you don't crave the salty food or the fried food. Like, I do stress eat. I'm aware when I stress eat. And like, even this week, I had a kind of a rougher week, stress wise. So, but I've done this promise to myself. Okay. And so I'm about to go stress eat. I'm craving that burger or whatever. Like, I know, like, I'm due. I haven't had one in a long time. Cheat meal plus whatever. I do this one thing. I'm like, do the exercise. Go to the gym. Okay. So I go to the gym. I do a typical exercise, a typical like circuit of resistance training, which is what I like to do. I do way more flexibility stuff as I get older. Like now I like about 20% of the time I'm doing stretches, you know, in between the resistance. And then after I'm done, man, that craving is gone. Now I want to go eat fresh apples, a clean protein source, and I just want to keep that euphoric feeling going. And I know the burger, which I was craving before, is not going to do what my body's asking me right now. Now my body is no longer stressed. Okay, we have the dopamine that's been released, and you're even hungrier. And I find that food is even more delicious when you like kind of worked for it. And you kind of like, okay, yeah, maybe if I do end up having a little bit of fries here and there, that'll be just like a luxury, but I really want some substantive food. So that's another way that exercise kind of self-regulates you. It also helps you tease out, because eating is such a psychological thing, right?
Very emotional.
Yeah, very emotional. Like we're babies crying. What do we think? They need food. You know, so we've been literally, since we were born, like conditioned to have a different relationship with food above nutrition. And I found that exercise, or regular exercise, or even just that biofeedback you get from working out, it kind of readjusts your mind. Like, hold on, am I hungry? Am I stressed? Am I thirsty? You know what I mean? Like, these things all get jumbled together sometimes when you're just not sure. You know, just your brain kind of interprets it as a binary thing, but it's actually more complicated. And if you tease it out, then you'll get what your body actually needs. And I find that exercise is the great. I'll tell you some other benefits of exercise for me personally when we circle back, but I want to just hear your thoughts about the psychological component of exercise.
Yeah, so as it relates to nutrition, there's particular hormone signaling that when you exercise, it upregulates certain things. You become a little bit more sensitive and aware of when you're getting full, and then you're a little bit better of understanding your appetite control gets a little bit tighter generally. And there definitely is the very real phenomenon of your body recognizing what it wants. You see this a lot with pregnancy when women are like, I'm craving this thing. It's usually because their body's deficient in something that food has. So we do have this very wild, innate intelligence within us. And I think over time, this is part of where like In Touch came from for my company name. It's like getting people back in touch with their body and the intelligence that they have. We just through all of our society and cultural signaling and upbringing, we do lose a lot of the intelligence that we have. And we're kind of told not to trust it. But exercise, very natural thing. We were born to kind of move our bodies. We're physical beings, as you said, like the evolutionary adaptations we have made us to this point. We have these thumbs that allow us to grab things. We have these feet that are awesome for running and walking. So there's just this very natural aspect to moving your body. And it doesn't always have to be in a gym. Like, I'm one of the biggest advocates for walking. Like everyone who's ever worked with me, they know it starts with walking, because it just gets your baseline throughout the day significantly higher. And then we'll add exercise on top of that. But yeah, I can't be a big enough advocate for exercise. And I do count walking in there because it's such an accessible form of exercise for people, where it's like, you don't need a gym membership. You basically just need a safe area to walk in. And granted, not everyone even has that. But it's one of the lowest barriers to entry, where people think it's too low threshold. It's too easy. It's just walking. It's not going to make a difference. But walking makes an enormous difference to your overall health, especially if you don't walk much. There's a nonlinear dose response relationship, which just means the less you walk now, anything more is incredibly beneficial. Like, if you go from 4,000 steps a day to 5,000 steps a day, that 1,000 step increase, you'll see a bigger impact than if you go from 10,000 steps a day to 11,000 steps a day. So for the people who don't do anything more than you're doing is very, very beneficial. So I try to make exercise much more accessible to people, and not thinking, oh, it's got to be at least 4 days a week. Every workout's got to be hard. I've got to be doing strength training and doing cardio. I try to get a lot of people just started to be like, just walk more than you are now, and get people on those early wins.
That's my exact recommendation.
Yep.
So cardiovascular, So cardiovascular health is intimately related to mobility. Yeah, so 30 to 60 minutes of what we'd call aerobic exercise, which includes walking. I literally say that to every single patient of mine. Every single patient says, so because that is like, there's so many benefits. Okay, you're getting mobility. More likely than not, you're leaving the device that you were looking at. You're going into nature. You're getting some fresh air. You're activating some of the bigger muscles. And then the vascular system, if you ever look at an artery like in cross section, it has a layer of muscle in it.
Oh, interesting.
The entire vascular system has a layer of muscle in it because it's meant to contract like rhythmically and throughout the whole system. So if you dissect any artery and veins do have a muscular system, but it's much thinner, and that's why the arteries are stronger and more resilient. And whatever artery we're talking about, it needs that movement. Okay, that walking movement, when the to and fro of the vessel. So let's say we're talking about my brachial artery, okay, in my behind my bicep. This movement right now, just flexing my bicep or brachioradialis. Yeah. Okay. If you guys are on his podcast, then you know this is the brachioradialis mainly. But anyway, so when we do these movements to our muscles and bones, the arteries get stretched longitudinally. Okay, so not only do they flex, like for example, they want, I'm flexing my artery now, or I'm flexing my radial artery like this. It's getting flexed, but when we do the muscles around them, they also get flexed longitudinally. So they rely on that, just like we rely on like muscle movements to maintain our muscle. The muscle layer in there is also really important for the integrity of the artery.
Yeah.
Okay, so that to me is proof alone that you need exercise for the whole body, and walking is just an easy way to do it.
So I'd love to hear, I think it'd be great if you just talk through kind of where the clinic is right now, where the practice is now, from what you're doing here, the other providers you have in the clinic, and then I can go into talking about the exercise component, and then I'd love to just hear what your vision is for the future.
Yeah, so I mentioned why I wanted to do like a more comprehensive preventative clinic rather than just doing the. So my clinic, I do all the traditional cardiology stuff. I don't want that to be misconstrued at all. Most cardiologists, even if they don't believe anything that we're saying, okay, are actually ahead of the curve compared to other doctors with respect to physical fitness. It's all over our literature. Yeah, and now like all over our literature are the proper diets, the Mediterranean diet, the even vegetarianism. Like it's now really mainstream, the things we're talking about. Even resistance training. There's some articles now that compare people doing HIIT and not doing HIIT with resistance training. Mm-hmm. And that's in our literature too, which is phenomenal. So I do the traditional stuff, all the traditional cardiology risk factors, screenings. I'm very high on screenings. I like to do as much information as we could that's covered by insurance. Sometimes some things are out of pocket. So I have the basics of a cardiology clinic. We do the monitoring, the sonography, and all that stuff. But one thing that comes up right away, and that's why that's how we met, is through Dr. Burke, is that a lot of my patients have immobility issues, okay, that have not been addressed by anyone else. And I've seen that throughout my career. Like I'll see someone come in on a walker or in a wheelchair or just with a terrible gait, and then I'm supposed to put people like that on blood thinners and then constantly increase their blood pressure medications. So I'm like, no, I need these people moving, otherwise if you're not moving and you're just sitting all day, your blood pressure is going to keep going up and up. It's known as one of the sitting diseases, that and diabetes. They're just known as sitting diseases. So that's how Dr. Burke, we actually, when I was telling her about the place, we met in a coffee shop, and I think she was doing something. I don't even know how we were in this. I honestly don't even know how we started talking, but we're very much of the same mind. She's very athletic. She does a lot of workouts. She does yoga and Pilates and stuff. So maybe we're talking about workouts, and then she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get back into physical therapy? And she told me, I'm like, oh, I'm doing a place. Yeah. And then we literally met like around the time I opened, and I'm like, okay, you have a space. So now like my patients love her because she's excellent. And the thing that I just got done talking about is available here. Yeah. That slightly improved access to healthcare seems to work wonders for a lot of people. Yep. Okay, some people you're never going to get them to. And then similarly, the idea is to have a trainer that caters to my population. And then that's kind of like how we met. And so we've been like trying to find ways to collaborate and for you to like to see our patients maybe while they're here, even integrate. Like what I see for the future is like activities going on while I'm seeing the patient, while I'm maybe adding on a blood pressure medication, there's someone doing lunges behind me. Like it needs to be normalized. Like those things need to be normalized. It's not a weird thing. The gym is not an intimidating place. And now the doctors like literally want you to do it in this office, you know? And I feel like a lot of elderly people especially are nervous about doing stuff like that. And if I'm around, like that gives them, you know, a little bit more reassurance. And I, like I said, every single patient, they get these speeches about how important mobility is. And I feel like, so that's available. There's my colleague, my friend, and my own doctor is also here. He's a primary care doctor. We share the space. So if a patient doesn't have a primary care or we have that access. Yeah. We just got access. We just have a new provider that's going to be doing wound care for us, and she specializes in elderly like geriatric care as well. So that's another avenue. You know, I spent several years treating peripheral arterial disease and venous disease. And so they get all kinds of ulcers that are not healing, which again impact your mobility. Like if you look at the statistics of someone who gets an amputation, it's much worse than someone who just had a heart attack. Like their mortality goes up like fourfold when you have an amputation. And depending on where the amputation is, you know, because of the immobility it causes, then their mortality goes up even higher. You know, so we have wound care here, and my vision on top of that is to have some social services, because mental health is huge, and to have that available, and nutritional services. So right now I do have a remote company called Nudge that will help with nutritional services for some patients. But it would be great. And I actually talked to a dietitian when I first opened to have one here. But it's also similar that it's not well covered by insurance. Yeah. Nutrition, you know, like physical therapy, not well covered. Exercise, some insurances will pay for your gym membership, which is great. But better than nothing. And then nutrition, hit or miss, you know, so people have to go out of pocket for things like this. But I feel like if you have these essentials covered and literally under one roof, I think you're more likely to get compliance and just for them to get on board with the mentality of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I was so interested when I met Dr. Burke, and she's like, oh, by the way, when you come in to meet, because we were just coming in to chat when I first met with her, she's like, by the way, you should meet Dr. Makki, and then kind of hit it off from there for very obvious reasons. When I first got into the training industry, it was in Colorado, and it was at what I didn't know at the time was a very progressive building. So it was one building that was owned, and then there was a bunch of subcontractors within it. So there was a gym, there was mental health providers, there was dietitians, there was a lab downstairs, there was primary care, there was chiropractors, and then across the street, across the parking lot was physical therapy. So a lot of what you're talking about. And I was like, I just saw, when something was outside of my scope or I realized they needed something else, I would just walk them down the hallway, and just removing the barrier of sending somebody out in the world to figure out how to find a good dietitian or how to find a good mental health provider, where you can just literally walk them down. I don't know the numbers on it, but like care coordination is an entire profession for exactly that reason, because our healthcare system is not easy to navigate. So yeah, that was my first exposure to it. And I was like, our healthcare system's awesome. And then I moved down here to Phoenix. I was like, oh, that's not how any of this works. That was a unicorn. That was a very rare instance. So it was very progressive, and I really liked the model. And I saw how beneficial it could be for people. And then so over the years, I've taken the role of like helping people. When I recommend a provider, I'm like, I give them the list of recommendations. I try to make warm introductions. But when it's physically in the same office, it's incredibly easy, and it's much more helpful. And that's why I was so interested in kind of doing this and pursuing this sort of partnership with you, just because, I love the vision of that's what it should feel like when you walk into a doctor's office. It shouldn't be oh, it's going to be full of sick people. We're promoting health here. People are exercising here. The doctor exercises here. It's a health focused environment, not a sick environment. So that's why I was so interested. I was like, it's a very interesting opportunity.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you. Yeah, I think, there's part of this is still an experiment for me, so we'll see how it goes, because I'm still using our current insurance plans. And so there's all kinds of stuff I have to learn, because I don't know, I didn't know much about that until I had to. But yeah, I mean, I think the more of these services you can have under one roof, the more compliance you're going to get, the more change in the mindset. This is a very interesting location where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this intersection of Phoenix, Scottsdale, and Paradise Valley, you have a lot of healthy and health-oriented people here, in addition to the usual like not so healthy. And I do get some of my patients from other parts of the valley, some Phoenix and other areas. But so this is like above average, like the level of knowledge and what they should and shouldn't be doing. So it's, in that sense, this type of thinking kind of fits in the area.
Yes.
So I'm reassured by that. But like, this is still an experiment for me, because I feel like this goes back to why did I open this clinic. I feel like I wanted to open up like a sort of a novel product, kind of provide concierge level care, okay, but through the insurance systems we have, and to get above average results. A lot of people in this space have read like Peter Ataya's book about medicine 2.0 and stuff like that, and I'm really on that mindset. Like, I feel like there's a lot we can do with the resources we have now. I mean, there's so much information we can get. Like, I just recently got into this Aura ring, and I'm just fascinated by all the biometrics you can get. Mm-hmm. Even if it's 80% accurate, it's still better. It's good to know. Like, it gives you some interesting data, like heart rate variability. How well did you sleep? How long did it take you to sleep? Stuff that if I put a monitor on someone right now, like, I can find a fib, but I couldn't tell you their heart rate variability.
Yeah.
So, and to me, that is important, because that tells me how they're coping with their environment. What's their vagal tone like? When people show up on the types of monitors that I prescribe as a cardiologist, they're already in trouble. But like, if I have some more biometric data, like the Aura ring gives you, like, you can go into another layer of health. You can go, okay, so what is going on? Do you need more breathing exercises to get your vagal tone up? Do you need more resistance training, to bring down the average number that it's been for the last few months? So like, there's things like that I would love to talk to people about as well, but I'm still in the phase of putting out fires, and that is what I see like going forward. Another technology that I'm really fascinated by now, and the accessibility of it, is the glucose monitor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that should no longer be just for diabetics. I think almost everybody would benefit from knowing that knowledge. Mm-hmm. Even if you do it just for 3 months, if you just start wearing that monitor. So now I'm starting to tell people about it. Like, you know what? You're not diabetic, but your sugars are going up, and or you have an interest in your health. Why don't you see what these foods do to your bodies, and just keep a log, and then that biofeedback, like, oh, when I eat this, that's what happens to my sugar. But when I eat this, I still feel good, but that doesn't happen to my body. And just, I think a couple of months of that data, you'll change your life. I mean, there's a doctor I work with up north that lost like 30 pounds like this.
I believe it.
By just learning about, and he's older than me, and so it took him that long to learn about that. But that's just like accessible information, So there's a lot of information out there. You got to be able to integrate it properly and, to get these good outcomes. But there's so much help now, It's almost like the best time to be sick is now.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, the CGMs are really interesting. I think there is a push to making non-prescription CGMs from both Abbott and Dexcom.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think there will be an over-the-counter consumer grade where it's probably more sensitive in the mid ranges and it's less sensitive for the highs and lows.
So the CGM, that's continuous glucose monitoring. That's
yep.
What you're, that's yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's what.
Yeah. So I've probably CGM'd myself for like 2 years. Just
you did.
Yeah, I was just very curious at the time.
What did you learn from that time?
You learn. I mean, you do all the stupid things first where you're like, oh, I wonder how much a tub of ice cream will affect me fasted. And then can I do a bunch of air squats to kind of blunt the glucose response? So beyond all that stuff, so the takeaway from what I just said is engaging large muscle groups after a meal is very beneficial. You walking 10 minutes, that's like the standard recommendation I give people. But like in Japan, there's a saying, it's like 100 steps to 100 years, meaning anytime after you eat, you should take 100 steps. So that's like, and that's a saying from like 1,000 years ago. So it's like, there's this knowledge that's been kind of carried through for a long time where, we're using technology now to learn it, but it's nice to see that there's
wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but the biggest thing for me, it was mostly what I expected. The biggest thing I found was like sleep. Sleep really affects glucose, where I could eat the same thing every day, and I normally do because I'm boring and just that's how I do things. But if I get a lousy night of sleep, my average glucose will be like 5 to 10 milligrams per deciliter higher all day.
That's amazing.
So you're just, and I think that's been observed in studies, like they've tried to isolate that. But yeah, so it gives you information. It starts helping you understand, because a lot of people who don't do this professionally, I'm sure you just see lots of disparate pieces of information, and it is all kind of that. It's disparate, it's disconnected, but then you can see, oh, I do need to prioritize my sleep because that's related to blood sugar. And now after listening to this, hopefully they're understanding, having muscle mass can really help control my blood sugar as well. So like exercise, nutrition, diabetes, sleep, all these things can tie together. And I think it's a very interesting piece of technology to teach people how these things are related.
I'm glad you did that with on yourself, because that's really sometimes the only way to learn something is to do it on yourself. With respect to exercise, maintaining the big muscle groups seems to be paramount for glucose management. That's probably the number one way to reverse insulin resistance, which almost at least 50 to 60% of the population is insulin resistant. Sure. Okay, so everybody can use more muscle mass. But while we were talking, I also thought about so this is the state of our lives now. Okay, because if you think about it, most of the food sources that are readily available are high carbs. Okay, so an adaptation to this environment is more muscle mass. But maybe back in the day when we walked more naturally and then had to work for our carbs, and mainly protein / vegetarian diets, more diverse diets, depending on whatever part of the world we're in, like that cohort of people back then didn't have to worry about getting their muscle mass per se, because they weren't just bombarded with carbs and just terrible food. You know what I mean? So, and ironically, they were naturally just more active. So it's almost like, yeah, they had to be. So it's almost now like a double whammy where we're kind of like terrible food sources and everyone's job is becoming more and more specialized where they don't have to move as much. That's I have a stand-up desk and I barely sit down, but like that was one of the things I thought about when I put this office together. Like I know sitting is not going to help, so we're getting kind of like, we're getting it from both ends. Like the environment has gotten more dangerous, if you will, in terms of food, and our lifestyle is just like not requiring us to move as much. Yeah. So that's why that's why we're talking here. You know, if everything was normal or more natural, we wouldn't even have to talk about, oh, you got to maintain muscle mass. Because now you tell someone in their 70s, hey, you gotta bulk up. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm retired. Like it's like you're asking them to start a new job, and their mindset is like, oh, now this is when I'm laid up, I don't do anything, which is the opposite of actually what I found. You know,
you want to keep
like the older you are, the more dependent you are on that muscle mass.
Yep.
You know, the younger you are, you can get away with it. You have more muscle mass just by virtue of your youth. But as you get older, it's harder and harder to hold that muscle mass. So it's more and more important to do things to preserve your muscle mass. I do have a question for you. What exercises do you think are essential for the elderly people to maintain those big muscles in their bodies?
The primary one I go to is squatting, just because it's how you get out of a chair. Right. So I think of it more from like a task completion standpoint, where it's like, do you have the strength to stand up out of a chair? Do you have the strength to control yourself back down to a safe seated position?
That's hilarious you say that, because that's literally why I got these really low chairs in my office. You can get a picture. Yeah, to test people hate me for that. They think I'm cheap or weird because it's like these deep leather chairs that are not easy to get out of. They're not the typical like, oh, they're ready to go. And I want to do that just to see that. Yep. And I want them to know, like, that's not good. Like, you need to be able to get out of a chair. And that's funny that you mentioned the exercise, because I too believe the squat is, you know, obviously they're going to have knee problems that will limit how deep, and they should probably do it supported with the wall, right?
It's tons of
it's all buildable, you know? Yeah. And so I agree that the cardiologist agrees with that one. So what else do you do for the upper body? What do you recommend?
So I think of things, and this is why it's great that Dr. Burke is here. Most people above a certain age are going to have a shoulder or a neck, or they're going to have something. So you need to work within what people can do. But I think of like just basic patterns of pressing and pulling. And then I think of horizontal and vertical. So if people have full enough range of motion, think of a standard bench press. That's like your standard horizontal push. Yep. And then like a seated row, that's your horizontal row. Yep. Yeah. And then pressing overhead, that'd be like a shoulder press. That's your vertical press. And then like a lat pull down or a pull up. Not that I have many people doing pull ups, but that's like that vertical pulling pattern. So
that's great. So you got 4 quadrants, you know, pull down, pull, and push.
Yep.
And then you're getting yourself up.
Yep. Squatting. And then I try to drive some sort of rotation if people can, because, you know, we like to be able to turn, hopefully.
That is something I'm starting to notice, that as I get older, I'm noticing that my flexibility in certain things is just naturally going away because I'm not doing these movements, you know? So there's a lot of stuff that I personally, you know, someone in their 40s has had to just like, oh, I am getting older. Another thing that I've noticed is our ankles and like foot issues that a lot of people have. I feel like people forget about everything below the ankle, and they just keep their feet like wrapped up or in some ill-fitting shoe wear, and then they wonder why it's like, oh, they're all like contracted, they're having neuropathy, they're like all these things. It's the same thing. There's muscles between our tiny bones and our feet that need to be exercised, and that can only happen with like maybe walking barefoot a little bit, you know, getting all the toes engaged, separating the toes. There was someone else that I was talking to at a Christmas party recently. He's like one of those health guys that's always doing the trends. And this guy is in his 20s and he does all of this exercises and stuff. But one thing that he does regularly is that he wears these toe spacers when he goes to sleep. I've never even heard of such a thing, but it makes sense. Like, people need to keep that distance in their toes, the individual toes. Have you know about this?
Yeah. I got it's a weird statement to make without context, but I got really into feet stuff a few years ago. Yeah, because like feet are really important. It's the thing that's in contact with the ground all day. So like through like kind of squishy shoes like this, you kind of lose your sensory and your sense of the ground. And kind of if you start to lose that, balance is going to be tough. But yeah, like you have so many muscles and bones and tendons in your foot. And if you're kind of in this very stabilized shoe all day, you're saying, hey, none of you really need to work. The shoe will do the job. So you get people barefoot. That helps rebuild the foot a little bit. I do a lot of single leg stuff once I can progress people to that, because you put somebody on one leg, their foot's going to start working more than it normally does. And when you think about it, walking is a single leg activity for a very brief period of time, but it's a single leg activity. So I train a lot of single leg for, walking, balance, fall risk, all of those components.
Yeah, I also have a foot fetish. No, I'm just kidding. No, not. So yeah, I got into foot stuff. Previous practices that I've been in have just exposed me to like some really great podiatrists, Dr. Zhang and Dr. Shaw, Dr. Schulman. All these guys like have been my buddies for years, so I learned a lot about the feet. Also, like with limb salvage, you learn a lot about the feet because talking about amputations and stuff. When we're trying to prevent amputations and open up arteries, you have to know like where's a good place. What's the least amount of amputation that someone can get away with to maintain their mobility. That's an extreme example. But like day-to-day stuff that I see, I'll see people with like discrete swelling around the ankle, okay? 90% of the time when that's the case, their arches have fallen.
Sure.
Okay? This is like from doing veins for many years, is like that heel to toe is so important. There's actually a cluster of veins on our arch that follow the shape of our arch that only work when it's heel to toe to help bring the blood out of the foot. So it's called a vein pump. Okay. Yeah. So if that's not working, and you imagine the foot situation you described earlier, a foot in a shoe that's just being ignored. They're like, you're walking around like this. Yeah. When the foot really needs that effleurage, that massage, that deep tissue massage of the fluid to go back up into the bigger veins and back into circulation.
But naturally, we have an arch.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the lengthening that sort of activates that pump?
Well, the pump is like spanning the bottom of it's like the plantar surface of the foot. Okay, so if you're not engaging it at all, and it's just like you're walking barefoot or flat foot, it's not milking the fluid out of there. It's just like smashing it. You know what I mean? It's just smashing. And then when the foot collapses, virtually everyone that has really bad feet, they're going to start having swelling in their ankles because you can't circulate that stuff out of there. Well, we do use compression and stuff like that, but that's been like a very subtle observation of many years of, at the very least, why the foot is important. The other thing is, I've seen so many discrete blockages in the arteries because we'll do angiograms. That's when we put a catheter and then put dye into the vessels. Yep. There'll be so many blockages that are very discrete right at the flexion point of the feet. Okay? Like, why is it there in so many people? It's because of this immobility of the foot. Like, or the too tight of footwear that have over time just literally blocked your artery and strangulated your foot, So the foot is fascinating, and it's very important, for our mobility. And I do end up talking about it, looking at it way more than I enjoy, but you can't ignore the whole person,
Yeah, all the way down to the foot. So we're going to start wrapping up soon. One last thing I wanted to mention, just because I think it's very interesting, and usually most people don't know this. For people who have insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, they usually think of insulin as being the thing that helps shuttle glucose into the cells. But if you're insulin resistant, insulin's obviously not doing that job as well as it should be, or your muscles aren't responding to it that well. But exercising, just resistance training, moving your muscles, allows that same exact thing to happen. So it's called insulin independent glucose uptake, which is basically your body doing a magic trick where it's like, oh, you can't do it with insulin. Just by moving your body, it allows you to do that, which for people who are insulin resistant, it's like, that's a great trick. That's a great tool for you to have while you work on these other factors of adjusting your lifestyle, prioritizing sleep, walking more, changing your nutrition, because those habits can take time. but you have this exercise component that can help you immensely right off the bat. So it's just like this fascinating thing that our body can do.
I love the resistance training as a treatment for insulin resistance. There's all the stuff you mentioned. There's hormones that get upregulated, and then the insulin level goes down because the body's more efficient, doesn't need as much insulin to handle all the glucose that's circulating around. And another like deeper layer to this is when you're, let's say you're insulin resistant, you're in like an insulin rich environment, that is upregulating some genes in your body. That is signaling genes that are not necessarily going to help you. And then conversely, if your insulin is low and your sugar is low, that's also signaling some new genes. And that whole fasting, separate discussion, okay, that all works on the genetic level. You talk about the telomeres growing longer with intermittent fasting. That's like a whole cascade of hormones that were activated by regulating the insulin. So like you literally can redefine your genetic code if you resistance train. You're maintaining your muscles and bones. Oh, I guess one last thing. I mean, I can't talk about this enough, but you always think about muscles that they're being kind of kept in the framework of bones. Okay. Yeah. So the bones is like the framework of the body, and the muscles are kind of like they're doing the work within the framework of the muscle of the bones. Okay, because the bones are these firm things that are just like concrete, right? But it's actually not the case. They both work together. Like you're not gonna turn over bones as quickly if your muscles are atrophying. Okay, the muscle pulls on the bone and changes the bone structure just as you expect the muscle to be tethered to the bone. That's why you see a lot of people, their gait completely changes, and you see them developing bowed legs, for example, or other abnormalities with their back and spinal stenosis and all these bone problems. Okay, that we think, obviously this is another discussion, and we're gonna wrap it up. But like you think the bone is like a firm thing that doesn't change, and it's inevitable that it's gonna compress and break and stenose and all these things, but it's not true. It's actually we have muscles in between our vertebrae that go up diagonally and sideways. There's no earthly reason to have muscles there unless it was meant to maintain the bone and to help with the rotation and stuff like that. So these are the things you got to keep in mind. Like, yeah, the bone, I can't will my bone to grow or whatever, but when I maintain the muscle around that bone, similarly with knee problems, if you build up the right muscles. I mean, I've done this just with my own self with shoulder injuries I've had. Like I fixed it by just fixing the muscles around it.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and we will have to cut ourselves off because we could just keep going on this. Maybe we'll do a multi-part series or something into the future. But yeah, so anyway, hopefully this gave everyone a decent overview of kind of first introducing you, understanding why you're trying to incorporate exercise into your practice. I'm really excited to be kind of working out of here and just kind of being one part of that vision. Like I said, I love the vision. It's what I kind of came into this industry seeing, and then to not really see it replicated until this point is sad. So, I want to help build this as a model of like, we'll have to figure out the financial side because that's, it's interesting where it's cash pay and insurance, but I'd love for this to be like a model for other people and other practices, even in the area, to look to be like, that's a very innovative way to treat people as whole people. So that's why I was so interested in doing this. Hopefully people that have watched have gotten something out of it. And if you're in the area and need a cardiologist, come see Dr. Makki. Thanks so much for coming.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Hey everyone, that's all for today's show. I want to thank you so much for stopping by and watching, especially if you've made it all the way to this point. If you'd like to be notified when new episodes are going to be released, feel free to subscribe and make sure you hit the bell button as well. To learn more about today's guest, feel free to look in the description. You can also visit the podcast website, which is exploringhealthpodcast.com. That website will also be linked in the description. As always, likes, shares, comments are a huge help to me and to this channel and to the show. So any of that you can do, I would really appreciate. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.